I'm the youngest son of Carl Wren, which makes me special because I'm the baby. I love you, bro. There are so many different types of fathers in this world. Some aren't there. Some are abusive or even over-fatherly. This is the type of father my dad was. My dad wasn't the type of guy to play catch with a baseball. He wasn't the type of father to watch a football game on Sunday morning, or a dad that would go to your school events. He was better than that. He was a real father, that taught you work ethics, and how to provide for your family. He was loving, and always did what he thought was best. He was the smartest man I ever knew. He taught me a trade as a mechanic, and how to be a man. Growing up, my dad was already at work before you went to school, and usually in bed when he got home. I once told my dad, as a mechanic I've made every mistake a mechanic can make, when I was younger at his expense. That I must have been his most expensive kid. He never thought of it in that way, and laughed. I then told him, "Thank you for allowing me to make my mistakes on your dime, instead of with my employers over the years," and then he laughed even harder. When I was a kid, I once saw a newspaper clipping that stated my dad was a hero. That he single-handedly fought a fire all by himself. The clipping even had a heroic photo of my dad holding a fire hose with water, and fire all around him. When my dad got off work that evening, I asked him about the newspaper article, and if he was a hero. He responded that the word hero can come in many shapes or sizes. He rolled his eyes, and smiled. He sat me down, and started to explain the real story behind him being a hero. First, he was at this business, to work on their emergency fire pump motor. By working on the motor, the business had to disable their fire suppression system. Then a small fire broke out, that normally would have been quickly snuffed out in a timely manner, but because of my dad, and the fire suppression system being down, the fire grew rapidly, and eventually became a 5-alarm fire, with my dad caught in the middle. Second, my dad and 4 other men grabbed a few fire hoses, hooked them together and were able to reach the public fire hydrant outside the facilities. But when the fire hydrant was turned on, there was so much pressure the hose started moving the men, so they let go of the hose, and ran. Leaving only my dad holding the hose. My dad probably would have done the same if he'd known what the other guys did. If you have ever watched old cartoons, a person holding the end of a high-powered fire hose can not only get whipped around, but get whipped in the head if they let go, so my dad decided to hold on. To make matters worse, the pressure from the hose pinned my dad to a pole, and all potential exits were now engulfed in flames. At this point my dad stopped caring about putting out the fire. Third, eventually the fire department showed up to fight the fire. My dad thought that this would be the time to be rescued. He kept yelling to the firefighters, "Turn off the water, turn off the water," over and over, which would have released him from his pinned position, but due to the noise of the fire trucks, and sirens, the firefighters couldn't understand him. They thought he was giving instructions to coordinate on fighting the fire. If anyone knows my dad, in most cases this would be true. Eventually the fire was put out, and my dad was rescued. At the end of the day, according to the reporter on the scene, anyone crazy enough to battle the flames by themselves was a hero. The end result was my father might not be a real hero fighting fires, but he will always be a hero in my heart. Everyone will miss my dad's stories and adventures. The stories of his youth, truck driving, being a mechanic, and four-wheel driving in the desert. Everyone has a story to tell, and my dad was the king of storytelling. Some might say his stories were big fish stories, but as for myself, I loved every story, because it painted a picturesque story of his life. With that being said, I have a story about his nickname and CB handle, Camel Jockey. This is what was told to me once when I asked him about how he got his nickname. When he had his rock hauling business, he was doing work in and around Death Valley. After a long day at work, he and the other rock hauling guys were in a bar in the town of Beatty, Nevada, near Death Valley. The town was unusually busy, due to the World Camel Racing competition happening the next day. One of the promoters of the event came into the bar, and was looking for a contestant to replace one of the participants that became injured while practicing for the race. The promoters wanted to use a local to participate. They couldn't find any person crazy enough or willing to participate, until my dad with some liquid courage volunteered. The next day my dad realized the mistake he had made, but it was too late. He now was representing not only the town of Beatty, but the free world of the United States. He also met his camel named Lulu. Remember, this is a camel that threw a rider off the day before. My dad found that this camel wasn't very cooperative, and had a hard time even getting on. Once he got on the camel, the race started. When the shot went off Lulu, the camel started to go the wrong way, but being the manly man that my dad was, he was able to get Lulu under control, and to get into the race. Now this is where I have to pause the story. According to my dad, the other contestants were the finest professional Arabian camel racers in the world, from families that have been racing camels for thousands of years. As the race got going, he told me details of the adventure. Even though the race was probably around town, he told the story as if he braved the elements of Death Valley during the summer, always in the search for water during the race. Battling other racers, wild animals, and even pirates. Now I've been told that a story isn't a real story unless it has pirates. The race went from just being a race to a quest. As a young kid, I envisioned the majestic landscapes of the movie Lawrence of Arabia, the adventures of Indiana Jones, and the magic of Peter Pan, all rolled up as one. As the race came to a close, he was near the lead, and at the last minute he passed the leading camel, with thousands of people cheering. Now, when I wrote this, I looked up the population of Beatty, Nevada. It's a little over 800, but thousands is pretty good. He instantly became the hero of the United States, or at least the town of Beatty, Nevada, and became the fastest camel racer in the world, making him, aka, the infamous camel jockey. And yes, that makes me the son of the fastest camel racer in the world, but unlike the participants, I don't think I'll be carrying on the family tradition. In remembrance of my dad, never forget his wonderful stories. He always had new stories and adventures right up until the end. Even though his stories might have stopped here on earth, they will now continue in heaven. Dad, we love you, we miss you, and we will always be thinking of you. I know it won't be long, until I can continue the stories with you in heaven. I love you, and I'll see you soon.